I was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My parents were terribly keen on opera. My sister, who was 4 years older than I am, ran with a group of young people who later became the Canadian folk group, the Travellers, and they were sort of in the 50s, Canada's answer to the Weavers in America. And I went off to summer camp when I was 13. And on Saturday nights there was always a concert in the adults camp, and that's where I really got stuck into it, because seeing Seeger, that was game over for me. I guess when I was 16, my father bought me a guitar, and I sort of started playing guitar in high school. And I used to entertain at school assemblies, and then one thing, and it was just my hobby. And then I used to go, one of my friends, Marty Bachner, I used to babysit for him and his wife, and he also was a concert. He was bringing in people like Odetta before anybody knew who Odetta was, and Seeger and other groups. And I guess when I was at 19, and it was a Saturday night, and I had a date, and phone rang, and it was my friend Marty Bachner saying, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, "Well, I've got a date." And he said, "No," he said, "there's someone I really want you to meet." And we went out for dinner with a man named Paul Endicott and his wife, who'd come up from Detroit. And at that time, Paul Endicott managed Seeger and Brownie and Sonny and all sorts of people. And we all went out for dinner, and then we went back to Marty's house, and I sang a few songs. It was, that's what nothing. And the following week, I went to see my grandmother, who lived in Eastern Ontario in the countryside. And my father rang up and said, "You've got a letter here." And I said, "It's from the States." And he said, "Do you want me to open it?" I said, "Yeah." And it was from Paul Endicott saying, "My wife and I think you have a talent, and if you're interested in singing professionally, we'll start working on bookings for you." That was March 1960, and on May 6th, 1960, I got on the plane and flew to Denver to do my first gig, my first tour with Brownie and Sonny. I wrote my first song, Morning Dew was my first song. And I wrote that in Los Angeles in 61. Take me for a walk in the morning, to my honey. Take me for a walk in the morning, to my love. It wasn't until 67 that, I think Lulu was the first person to make a splash with it. But at that time, the Grateful Dead and people had picked up on it, and other. Fred Neil was the first person to record it, other than myself. I know I hear a man moaning, Lord. And was doing that, and then I signed with RCA, and everything was really cooking again. And then I fell in love and moved to England. So that was it. That was 69. I had 2 small children. And so I tended to do a lot of radio shows, which were great, because I'd nip off to the Maida Vale in the morning for 3.5 hours, and then I'd be home again. So I didn't really do a lot of live performing. My last concert was in Chicago, and it was really wonderful, and I thought, well, that's nice, let's just leave it like this now. Well, I really didn't feel like singing anymore. That was the fact of the matter. I mean, when I was in Canada, I got this phone call from Andy Votel, and Andy Votel was the one who Jarvis Cocker organised the Meltdown that year, and Andy contacted me because Jarvis had put out a couple of CDs with his favourite songs, and one of them was my song "Winter's Going," and on I think on the basis of that, he got me into that concert, and that was called the Lost Ladies of Folk, and that was really good fun. It was, and it was wonderful actually, because I hadn't stood on a stage, I hadn't sung in front of an audience, and well, since '89, and then this weird thing happened with Hornbeam, which was extraordinary. I mean, because I had seen I'd seen Tom and Peggy Seeger about 4 or 5 maybe 5 years ago at the Queen's Head, and then I read this review in the Guardian of Tom's new CD, and I thought, oh, I must get this CD. And then 2 days later, I came home, and there was an envelope through the door with Tom's CD and a letter from Robin Denslow saying, Bonnie, I think you're going to enjoy this CD, and by the way, Ski Williams, who was involved with the production, is a great fan of yours and would like to meet you, and if you're interested. And then so I thought about this. And anyway, then about 10 days later, I went over to Robin's house and doesn't live far from us, and met Ski, and there was Ski with all my vinyl. And then it all kind of happened, and then when I came back that summer, we came back in the autumn, he rang me up and said, oh, I'm having some friends over. And I mean, Tom was there, and Dave Morgan and Johnny and Robin Gill and a whole bunch of people whom I'd never met before other than Tom, and everybody sang and played, and I sang and played a few songs, and that was really nice. And the next day Ski rang up and said, we'd like to do and I was very kind of uncertain as to whether I really wanted to do this. And then we all gathered here when you were there that day, and I sat here with Dave and Johnny and Robin and Ben Phillipson, and we just started playing these songs, none of which any of them had heard, and I just, oh, this is good.
Yeah. Because it's only going to be 1 or 2 covers. Once you finish the pencil, it's just
what I said to Steve.
No, it's not like.
It's
Almost like a fade out.
Yeah.
Does that sound?
Well, we'll
Try it?
Yeah, we'll try and see.
Yeah,
And we'll watch each other.
Go around that 4 times.
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2.